Welcome back to the Delta Learning Podcast, the space where we explore how capability, culture, and commercial thinking come together to drive real performance improvements in today's organizations. This is episode 2 of our 2026 series, and in this conversation, we're focusing on a theme that's common for many of the organizations that we work with: leading change in complex environments. Today's episode explores how culture, capability, and commercial confidence combine to make change possible, and how professionals who don't see themselves as salespeople can still play a critical role in generating revenue, articulating value, and sustaining long-term client partnerships. I'm delighted to be joined by Rachel Eyres, Director at Moorhouse Consulting and one of our valued clients at Delta Learning. Rachel brings over 25 years experience in a career spanning organizations including Deloitte, Dell, and Explio. Her perspective offers a powerful view of what selling consulting services really means in a modern relationship-driven environment. In this episode, Rachel and I explore what this looks like in practice, why it's about building trust, demonstrating value, and delivering impactful client outcomes every time. We talk about how technically brilliant people, many of whom would never describe themselves as commercial, can learn business development skills and develop the confidence to play a bigger role in growth and change. We also look at how capability building turns commercial thinking into everyday behavior and how the role of the consultant is evolving as organizations navigate transformation, complexity, and new expectations. So whether you're working in learning and developing commercial capability or managing client relationships, this episode is full of practical insight you can apply straight away. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Delta Learning Podcast, Leading Change in Complex Environments, Culture, Capability, and Commercial Confidence, featuring Rachel Eyres from Moorhouse Consulting. Okay, welcome everyone to our latest podcast. I'm really pleased to have Rachel Eyres from Moorhouse Consulting joining us. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Steve. Nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. I wonder if we could kick off with just a brief introduction. Tell us a little about your career to date.
Yep, sure. So my current role is I'm commercial director at Moorhouse Consulting, which is a management consultancy. And I also lead the energy, utilities and infrastructure team, which is about 60 people at the moment. The commercial director role is really about transforming our approach to sales and business development, but without losing the consulting sales model, which is in a nutshell means that we all sell and we all deliver. So we don't have separate sales teams. And then as for me and my background, I've got a long background in consulting and professional services, that industry, and also in sales, business development and sales leadership.
Thank you very much. And I know you've worked in organizations like Deloitte and Dell and Explio. How has that journey helped shape how you think about consultants working with salespeople, not working with salespeople, working almost as salespeople,
Yeah.
particularly when they don't really see themselves as salespeople?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a very particular view on this, which is that sales and consulting are intrinsically linked. So, in a services firm, you can't just sell and run. You have to stay for the delivery and make sure the client gets the outcomes that they need and that you've promised them. And personally, I started as a consultant, as you said, at Deloitte, before I got into business development. So that's my bias as well. I have had lots of sales and business development training, partly thanks to you, Steve. And it's a process, just like consulting is a process. And I find the biggest thing for kind of non-sales consultants or consultants with less sales experience is a mindset thing. So the concept that you're offering something of value to a client and they need you just as much as you need them, you're solving their problems, not just asking for money. I think that's the kind of the switch that a lot of consultants do go on as they get more involved in business development. And it's not about what you say, about what you do, it's what's going on in your mind. And then I find the process is the same, almost regardless of what you're selling, as long as it's a kind of enterprise sales approach, whether it's a software product or a great big technology implementation or a tiny little management consulting project. It's the same approach. You're developing long-term relationships with your clients based on mutual value, keeping in touch, making sure you're putting yourself in their shoes and trying to get them what they want, essentially, and also being curious and strategic when you're engaging with them and trying to find out what's really going on.
And in your experience, is there a trigger when that mindset shift happens? And I'm thinking about, a typical consultancy career path where you're a more junior consultant, you tend to be 100% focused on delivery, and other people are concerning themselves with the business development activities.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think as you go up through the levels, typically as a consultant, you'll take on more of that business development activity. So as a junior consultant, you might start by writing a few paragraphs in an RFP response or preparing some slides for someone else to present, for example. As you get more senior, you might own the narrative in that response, or you might actually present that part of the presentation to the client. And so I think it's a gradual process for most consultants. But then I do see a real switch in our organization. It's when you get to kind of manager principal level where you're starting to own the client relationship. And that's when I think the mindset shift happens, because people realize that clients are just people, and the consulting process and the sales process are actually quite similar.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if we focus on Moorhouse itself, what does selling consulting mean from a Moorhouse perspective?
Good question. So So our engagements are typically based around some kind of change that a client's implementing. And there's lots of different things that we do to support that, but that's usually the trigger. It's a change in the way a business operates in some way. And it's usually driven by a commercial outcome or a business outcome of some kind that client is trying to achieve. So it's a very kind of high trust sale. The client has to trust that you're going to deliver what they need you to deliver, but also work well with. Usually you have to work with lots of stakeholders at the client end, and you need to be able to take them on the journey with you. So what that means in practice for the sales process is it's a very relationship-based approach. It's a lot of kind of recommendations, referrals, and you talk about this in the training you deliver for us, Steve. Networking, great account development, that kind of thing, rather than lots and lots of cold calling, essentially, and a real focus on outcomes and value. And then there are a lot of intangibles for us as well, because it's not just the what, it is the how, because people are going to be working intensively with us usually for at least a few months, and it's a people-based service. So kind of how our people work with your people, how we come across, how we take you on that journey. And therefore, that means in the sales process, you are usually putting a lot of consultants in front of clients and getting that kind of chemistry going and making sure that they're showing up in the sales process as they will in the delivery process.
Thank you. And if I think about the conversations that consultants are having with their clients, they're quite often pretty complex, sometimes very technical conversations, which can make it challenging for the client to really understand the value that they're getting. How do you bridge that gap?
So I suppose there's two types of consultants in my mind. There's probably more than two, but if we oversimplify, you've got your kind of deep technical SMEs who really know more about a subject than anyone else. And you've got kind of more generalists who are really good at managing client relationships and that kind of thing. And I think playing them in together in any sort of opportunity works really well, because your more generalist person might hear different things than your deep technical SME person, and they're always listening for the what is it that you're trying to achieve, Mr. Client? What? Yes, but why? But why? So what I find is the most useful question. What can you do if you achieve this thing that you're looking for? So that's kind of how I would see that playing out.
Yeah, and you mentioned, there are a number of intangibles, particularly if it's your first engagement with a client or a first engagement with another part of a client's business.
Mhm.
Um, how do you help make that tangible so that the client can make a positive buying decision?
Well, I think there's a few things there. So talking to other clients that have worked with us that they would see as peers or, at least trusted, similar sorts of organizations, that kind of thing. So we do a lot of that referencing. Like I say, we try and engineer a situation where our people are in front of the client as much as humanly possible. We might offer to run a pro bono workshop on the topic that we're discussing to get to the nuts and bolts of kind of what actually needs to be delivered and how. There's usually a structured procurement process in my industry, in energy, utilities and infrastructure, that involves a fairly decent length presentation to the client. So it's really that kind of, it's engagement basically, and proof points.
Thank you. And I mean, I know we've done some work to look at how you could measure some of those outcomes with the client, and
Yeah.
some of that is your best guesstimate, really, based on work that you've done with previous clients in similar situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to measure the outcomes, and we're working on that still at the moment, because sometimes you have to come in a year, 2 years, 3 years after you've delivered the work to know whether the outcome was actually achieved. But a lot of
Yeah.
clients are for us, are clients that we have for kind of 5, 10 years. And so we are consistently working with them. And so we can go back and, recheck, measure. We're doing that with a water company at the moment. We did a data strategy for them a few months ago, and we're just coming back now to see how the metrics are looking and whether they actually got what they needed.
And did they?
Yes, I think so, but we haven't finished the kind of the process of checking. But yes, I think so.
We were talking about that journey that consultants go on through their career, where they become a bit more commercially oriented, partly through necessity, because at some point they're given a target to start generating revenue for the organization. What are some of those skills that those consultants have that maybe are hidden or they're not so aware of, that you can tap into to help them on that shift?
So I think consultants are really, really good at getting to the heart of an issue, in a client conversation. Once you've got them in front of the client, and that is the bit that they have to learn as they get more senior, is getting to that point. Once they're sitting in front of a client and they're discussing a problem, because they've trained for so many years in that specific skill, they're really, really good at nailing the kind of, what is the problem? Who does it affect? How? What's the impact on your organization? How possible is it to fix it? All of the detail that really gets to the value creation thing. They're also typically really good at communicating what they've done. They'll put in really good governance on any engagement. So there's weekly meetings, monthly meetings, reporting, metrics, all of that kind of thing. And then the other thing they're really good at is planning, because most consultants have done some form of project management or project delivery. And that, they'll apply that to every single engagement. So that they're really good at planning kind of who they need to get round in an organization to make sure that the value is delivered and shared.
And where are some of the gaps from your perspective?
I would say it's mostly at the front end and the back end of the sales process. So, I mean, lots of consultants are really good at being out in the market and networking and asking for referrals or, that kind of thing. But lots aren't. They feel a bit uncomfortable with it, and they perhaps forget to keep in touch with people they've worked with previously or they've met, or so I think that's a real development area for most consultants as they move up. And then the other thing is the kind of, for more complex deals, the negotiating process and the kind of getting to closure of a deal so that you can get started on the work is, again, it's just a thing you have to learn, isn't it, and do a few times.
Yes, indeed. And having a structure and a process to that can be very helpful as well.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
we've done a lot of work together, building capability, the commercial capability of the team, and the training is one thing. But what else have you put in place around that to make sure it's sustainable at Moorhouse?
Well, I think in my mind, there's two really important things to do there. One is coaching and mentoring and support, which we're kind of working with you on, Steve. And that's very much a work in progress for us. So we're starting to put a bit of it in place, but that'll be a journey for 2, 3 years. just so that we can land all the training that you've delivered, for example, and the process and the structure, and make sure that we're showing people that it's important to us. We're helping them when they inevitably, try to implement it in practice and something doesn't quite go as they expected or they need a bit of advice. So that's one thing that we're looking at the moment. And then the other thing that we've been doing for a couple of years now is data and metrics and reporting.
Mm.
So as you know, we've got a lot of data from our internal systems that tells us a lot about how our sales process is functioning. And we're reporting on how much engagement we're having in the market, how many leads we're generating, what's the size of our pipeline, how many big deals are we focused on, what's our win rate, deal size, those sorts of things. And that's been really helpful for me as commercial director to know where to focus our efforts. Our deal size has tripled in the last year, but that's because we've really focused on it because we knew it would make a difference to us as a company. And
Yeah.
we're sharing all of that information with the firm. And I think that creates a bit of accountability, a bit of focus on the areas that we need people to focus on. So yeah, coaching and mentoring, and then data and making that data visible to the people who are actually doing the job.
Thank you. And it can't be easy. If I think about working with consultancy firms, consultants are recruited because of their capability, their ability to get on and work without supervision.
Yeah.
They enjoy a sense of autonomy. They don't particularly like to be micromanaged.
No.
And although they do work together in teams on projects, actually having a manager looking over their shoulder is not the thing that inspires them. Um, Equally, they're often driven by the interesting projects that they work on, not running a sales process. So how do you get that balance right?
Well, so my observation on that is that salespeople are exactly the same. So I've run sales teams a few times in the past, and they are no different. They don't want to be managed typically.
Mm.
Uh, so I think it's just a fine balance between providing support that's valuable to people and advice and making sure that it isn't just all take. I'm not just asking you to report to me or to kind of deliver a number and that kind of thing. It's, well, where are you at in the deal, and have you thought about this, and perhaps kind of running structured processes in some deals, which we do, to make sure that people have seen what their blind spots are. But yeah, and then it helps having done the job as well. I've been a consultant, I've been a salesperson, I am still both. So I think that is quite helpful because I understand kind of where they're at and what they're doing. And yeah, we're not an onerous. Moorhouse is a very kind of values-led, culture-focused organisation. We're a very friendly organisation, and we won't ever do kind of pointy commercial management of people.
Okay, thank you. And then if we switch from the commercial aspect to the consulting aspect, so what would you say describes or demonstrates a great consulting engagement with a client?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the most important thing is working out what the outcome is, getting to getting to the heart of the problem that you're trying to solve for the client and what it means for them personally and from a business perspective, and their other stakeholders and how it can be solved. That's probably the most important thing. So, for example, we've just been delivering a really massive program in the energy industry for the last 4.5 years. And we knew from the very start that the main stakeholder at the client wanted to do this differently. Because there are a lot of these kind of programs in energy. He wanted to show the energy industry how a program could be delivered differently. And so, lining your team up around that and making that your North Star, as well as the contract and everything else that you've got to deliver. But what's the actual outcome makes a massive difference. And all the feedback we're getting towards the back end of that project now is that we have shown the industry how to deliver differently, which was exactly what he wanted for personal reasons. It wasn't just a business thing.
Yeah, there was a personal win there as well,
Yeah.
uh, which is nice when you've got a client who is open
Yeah.
in that way to doing things differently. And was that particular client in situ for the whole of the project?
Yes, he was. He's still there.
Okay, that's still there. I
Yeah.
mean, that's quite rare in and of itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We see a lot of change all the time. You have to be able to deal with change as well. That's another key thing in the consulting engagement.
Yeah, and maybe a little side topic, but how are you seeing? It's the topic of the moment, isn't it? AI impacting either the needs that your clients have or how you're going about
Yeah.
your business.
I mean, on the former, I am no expert. We've got a whole team that looks at this, but I think AI is probably, or agentic AI, as people are, which is what people really mean, isn't it, when they say AI, is probably still 2, 3 years away from being fully enterprise level ready and valuable. Um, but lots of clients are focusing on readiness for that when it comes. So,
Mm.
is my data in a good kind of architecture and process and governance, and can I access it and feed it all into the AI properly? And is it high quality data? That's a really important thing. Are my people able to use AI when as it gradually becomes available and applicable to business? Those sorts of things, those building blocks is what we're seeing in a lot of clients at the moment, as well as a bit of testing and learning innovation type projects for actually doing AI use cases.
Mm.
Um, so that's how I see the next 2 or 3 years playing out probably. And then for us as a business, from a commercial perspective, a lot of the sort of tools that we use already, the enterprise CRM tools and those sorts of things are starting to build AI in. They're starting to, come up with intelligent questions and suggestions and that kind of thing. So I think over time that'll kind of help the commercial process become more efficient, probably. And then in delivering consulting, there's a narrative that lots of the sort of junior work is going to go away, preparing slides, doing research, kind of gathering data, summarizing, that sort of thing. And I think that's true, but I think there's a bit that people are missing, which is that consultants are becoming really expert at that. And now that's the value that they're offering to clients, is
Yeah,
using AI to do those things. So yeah,
yeah.
it is having a massive impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about a couple of trends. Many years ago, if you were working inside an organization, they provided you with a desktop or a laptop and maybe a Nokia 8210 phone. And then Apple and others came along with devices that were very attractive to individuals. And they
Yeah,
started buying better devices than the company was typically providing them with. And it feels a bit like that in the AI world at the moment, is that companies are scrabbling to catch up with the genie that's been released from the bottle. And individuals are becoming, personally expert in the use of AI.
yeah.
And, that's great because there's a desire for them to learn and develop. But it must also be a challenge for organizations that wonder how they govern it and how they get the best use from it.
Yeah, and the governance is a massive thing, and the security of the data that goes into these things. So, yeah, lots of companies are getting enterprise level tools with better data security and that sort of thing, which is great.
Yeah. Well, as we look to the future a little bit more, how do you see the role of consultants evolving over the next few years? Particularly because I don't know, in every generation, and I've been working for some time now,
Yeah,
it's always an era of unprecedented change,
yeah.
and here we are again in another era of unprecedented change.
I mean, if I come back to consulting being driven by change, so usually we're brought in when there's some kind of change. I don't see that affecting how consulting is delivered and how much it's used, etc. I'm sure there will be changes, largely driven by AI and driven by the pace of business change at the moment as well, which is just getting faster and faster and faster. But so we go to market with three things typically. It's cost reduction, data and AI, and organizational transformation. And everything that we do kind of plays into one of those outcomes. I don't see any of that going away over the next few years. In fact, there seems to be more of it now than there ever was. So it's a bit of a flippant answer. How we do it might change, but what we're doing and why we're doing it, I don't see changing.
Hmm. And I always find it interesting. Some people regard consulting as a kind of rinse and repeat, or a cut and paste.
Yeah.
That we've done a piece of work with one organization and we simply cut and paste and transfer that into another organization. What's the level of truth around that statement?
Probably depends which consultancy you work for. I,
Yeah,
I think it's really, really important to be flexible. So it is good to have a process, and most clients want to see that you've done it before, you've got a process, you've got tools, you've got, IP. But all organizations are different. Things change on the ground. You need to be able to adapt, to listen, to kind of tailor what you're doing to the client situation. Um, Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
it's it's really about answering that uh, uh, challenge that people set that all you're doing is rinse and repeating.
Yeah,
All you're doing is cutting and pasting from one organization to another.
yeah,
Um, if there is a second part to the question, it's around so how do you continually evolve and keep up with slash ahead of what's happening that's going to be helpful for your clients.
yeah. And that's about, for us, it's our internal service lines. So as well as sectors, we have kind of capability areas, if you like, that are focused on, for example, they might be focused on how to deliver strategy for customers, how to do that process. And there is some truth in the fact that working across multiple clients gives you something. So you do see the same issues over and over again, or the
Yeah.
same opportunities over and over again. And that's where the rinse and repeat comes in. But it can't be the whole engagement and the whole approach and do this our way because that's how we do it. Kind of needs to be, we're bringing a bit of what we've seen externally and trends and how the market's going. We're bringing our process, but we're also listening to you and where you're at and what you need, which is what makes it really interesting.
Yes. Yeah. And also a bit challenging. I think about where I am in my career, somewhat advanced. And on one hand, I'm really excited by the challenges and the opportunities that all of this change is bringing. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, whew, I'm glad I'm closer to retirement than the start of my career.
Me too. Do we have to learn new things? I don't know.
which I do enjoy doing, but but learning is hard, isn't it? It's
Yeah, really hard, especially when it's technical.
yes, technical learning. If we come back to the more commercial aspect, I mean another thing that's sometimes leveraged, not just at consultants but any organisation, is that you've done a piece of work and you've spotted an opportunity for an additional piece of work, an extension to it. And the client can be a little skeptical around, well, you just want to sell us some more stuff. How do the team kind of get beyond that?
I mean, consulting teams tend to be quite trusted once they're in and delivering, or that's my experience, certainly, and especially here.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's about having a conversation. So here's an example. At the end of a project, we will normally do a sort of wash-up session. Says, here's all the things we've done, here's what we've delivered, here's all your kind of content, and here are some things we've observed throughout the process that you might want to solve. There might be three, four, five things. You've got an issue with landing change in this department, or this technology doesn't work properly, or something like that. And that's valuable, I think, to most clients. It doesn't come across as trying to sell the next project. It comes across as we're trying to give you a bit of additional help and additional value over and above the thing that you've bought from us. So that would be a very typical approach from us, rather than the sort of, I don't like the term hard sell because I think
Mm,
it demeans what is a profession, but it, sales is solving a problem for a customer, isn't it?
yeah.
Creating a buying environment. I don't know.
An exchange of value.
Yeah, and usually the client will then say, okay, well, I can live with those challenges, but that one, how can you help me? And then it's a different conversation.
Thank you. Are there any key themes that you're seeing that are making the commercial aspect of being in a consultancy either easier or harder?
I mean, consultancy has been very competitive the last 2 or 3 years. You probably know this, partly because the government stopped spending on it, and so all the firms had less work. And a lot of the bigger firms actually have been through several rounds of redundancy and restructuring and that kind of thing. It's been a tough couple of years. We've weathered the storm fairly well, touch wood. But we do see competition, commercial competition is much, much stronger, and yeah, it's harder than it used to be to compete out there. I think that's good because I think it means you have to compete on value as well as price, because sometimes we can't win on price, and we're pretty open about that. We're not always the cheapest. We're quite often not the cheapest.
Yeah.
But we might be the organization that your team are happy to work with, or we might have certain niche skills and experience that no one else has got, for example.
Thank you. And as you look forward into the rest of 2026, without revealing any commercially sensitive information,
Yeah.
what are some of the big things coming up for Morehouse?
Well, so we're already in a growth phase at the moment. We've got zero bench pretty much, which is a good measure of how busy we are. And these three areas that I mentioned earlier, so the cost reduction, data and AI, and organization transformation, are really kind of what the market wants at the moment. So there's lots and lots of opportunity in the pipeline, lots and lots of bids and that sort of thing going on. So I think it's the challenge this year to some extent is to recruit fast enough to keep up with that demand, but not so fast that we end up with more consultants than work. So it's striking that balance as we go forward. And then for me, as in my commercial director role, continuing to improve our sort of sales maturity and our operational sales processes and governance and management and coaching and mentoring and all that kind of thing over the next year. But it's looking good. We're in a growth phase.
Excellent. Good to hear. And if you were to think about a book, a podcast, or a person that has influenced your approach, what would that be?
Oh, that is a very good question. So, gosh, I reckon about 25 years ago, someone recommended what was then a really old book called Selling to Veto. I don't know if you remember this, Steve.
Okay. I don't know that one, no.
Veto was very important top officer. It was an
Okay.
American book, and it was about kind of selling to C-suite people,
Yeah.
how to do it, how to build those relationships. And the concept in the book was it's not about selling, it's about building relationships and helping them. And it's really cheesy and old-fashioned and American. But I would say, having read it, 25, 30 years ago, all of the points in it still stand.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast. Where would people find out more about Morehouse?
Well, we visit our website, so that's moorhouseconsulting.com. You can read about us in the FT's Leading Management Consultancies report, which is just out last week. We're in lots of categories there, or give me a call, give me a shout.
Brilliant. Rachel, thanks very much. Really interesting conversation. And I've enjoyed spending a brief amount of time with you on the podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Delta Learning Podcast. We hope the insights shared today sparked new ideas and gave you something practical to take back into your role. If you found value in the episode, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss future conversations with business owners, sales leaders, and industry experts from across the Delta Learning Network. At Delta Learning, we help organizations build the skills that truly matter in 2026. From account management and business development to negotiation, pitching, and sales training for both salespeople and non-sales professionals. All of our workshops and programs are bespoke, designed to maximize performance and deliver real results for our clients. We also work with actor coaches to create immersive, high-impact training. We run live deal clinics, and in 2026, we're excited to launch our new sales sprints, an intensive practical approach developed in partnership with the experience works. To find out how we can support your organisation's growth, visit deltalearning.co.uk or email me directly at steve@deltalearning.co.uk. Thanks for listening.